Hi everyone, my name is Junon. I have a health science background and I'm the author of the book Truth and Empathy, How to Find Your Soulmate. And I'll put a link to my book below. This video is about a deeper dive into the significance of Jesus Christ. He is the most famous INFJ, and actually I'm going to put below a link to the personality type assessment I did of Jesus Christ some time ago, because I think that's important to sort of explore this topic, especially the fact that this is the spring season and we're going to be celebrating Easter. And I think that there's certain characteristic of aspect of his life that has not been really explored, and I think it's quite surprising because as I'm was analyzing better, I thought this is pretty unusual. And what I have on screen is some notes so that I don't miss anything. So the first thing that is kind of surprising when it comes to Jesus Christ is that he only preached for 3 years, so from the age of 30 to 33. And when you think about it, this is to starting a new religion. Why would 3 years enough to start this movement and for it to be carried for 2,000 years? And we still obviously know Jesus Christ very well. Actually, he's the most famous person in history. So we think so only 3 years. Anyone that you speak to who had to start a business or any type of enterprise will tell you 3 years is usually not enough to actually create enough momentum to carry over for that long of a period. The other aspect also is that he came from humble beginnings. So not only he only preached for 3 years, but also he didn't have connections or money to invest in this enterprise. So again, you think to yourself, okay, how did he was able to pull it off? And also, he didn't have the means that we have now. We didn't sort of having a car or even a bicycle or or an airplane to really preach and get the word out. So he traveled on foot. And if you travel on foot, you can only go so far to villages and towns that were near where he actually lived. The other aspect also is that the disciples were a mismatch of people who were poorly trained. Most of them were uneducated or even illiterate. So again, usually when let's say you're starting a new business, people always say that you have to find the best talent, people who are driven and the most educated. But it was not the case when it comes to Jesus Christ. And he didn't have a big team. He had maybe 12 people in terms of being close to him who was able to carry his message. So you think to yourself, okay, that's usually not how you usually would structure this new movement, especially if you know that you need a momentum that should carry you for centuries. Usually you would select the best candidates that really can understand the words and your ideas, not people that are clearly not really sharp or having the understanding of soul aspect of your message. The job of being a disciple was pretty dangerous because not only you were not given some kind of a salary or any types of benefits, you had to leave behind your family, even if you had some kind of property. So in other words, the fact that Jesus Christ was able to persuade this group of people to follow him into this very dangerous enterprise was really surprising. And ultimately, Jesus Christ was killed, but this disciple decided to carry on his word. That also is quite unusual when you think about it, because the best way to end a movement is to actually kill the leader. But this is not what happened with Jesus Christ. Actually, his death was used as a way to actually persuade people to continue his message. So in other words, it's sort of although people, yes, put a lot of emphasis on the fact that he died for their sins and the resurrection, but his life itself was a lot more unusual than the fact that people thought that he resurrected from the dead. The other aspect is that Jesus never wrote down his teaching, which is kind of strange, because if you want people to really understand you, you're starting a new religion, you want people to really be on the same page as you and write down really very clearly your message, your ideas. But it's really after his death that the Bible was written. And we all know that the risk of misunderstanding understand are pretty high if you were not even present when they actually wrote it down for you. So in other words, the Bible is the most strange writing when you think of, because it was written after his death by a ghostwriter that he never approved of. What is interesting is that although the Bible was written several centuries after the death of Jesus Christ, and there were edits, translations, so the risk of errors were pretty high, but at the core, the message could not be destroyed. So it's almost like when you look at the life of Jesus Christ, yes, people put emphasis on his death and resurrection, but there's so many anomalies that it's kind of interesting that he still was able to carry that message 2,000 years after his death. The other aspect is that it took like 325 years for Christianity to become the main religion of the Roman Empire. So, in other words, you would think that after more than 3 centuries, that movement would die. No, it actually sort of kept momentum, and it flourished later on. And obviously, people like to have sort of a tangible proof that something works. But it's almost like it's saying that if it's something is truth, is the absolute truth, is that it will survive. It doesn't matter how long and how many obstacles that you have to sort of face, but it still will work. So in other words, the fact that it took so long to take off, and it's actually still very much alive, because nowadays we're like 7 billion people on this planet, about more or less, and about a third of people are identify as Christians. So it's still very much a sort of like part of our reality. Jesus Christ is very much part of our modern life, because every year we celebrate his birth at Christmas and his death and resurrection at Easter, and these are statutory holidays, and this is all over the world. The core message of the Bible, which is truth and empathy, is always with us. So when Jesus Christ said, "I will be with you till the end of time," it is true, because you cannot go against it. Everything that we do, it's always rooted in the principles of truth and empathy. In other words, whether you interact with someone at school, at work, in business, in your personal relationships, we all know that if you want to know the core of a person, it has to do with their level of integrity, which has to do with their level of truth and empathy. So this Christ's case study is so unusual, because if you look at the number of facts, it doesn't really make sense. A young man who only preached for 3 years, from a small, humble beginnings, no money. He's only had like 12 disciples. He didn't write down his words and his ideas, and it took 325 years before that movement became the main religion of the Roman Empire. And up to now, he is the most famous person in the world. And he didn't have internet, or he didn't have airplanes to actually go into different countries to tour and preach. I mean, it is so unusual. The Bible was written many centuries after his death. So the risk of having errors inserted in the Bible is pretty high, and translating to different languages. I mean, because his story was so unusual, that's why I thought it would be interesting to do a deeper dive to really sort of bring out those really interesting aspects of his life. So let me know what you think about this analysis by commenting below. If you like this video, if you learned something, please click on the like button. Also remember to click on the bell to be notified of other videos I'm going to be making. Subscribe to my channel, and we will talk soon.